Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to be learning about copyright and why it's so important in our everyday lives. Whether you're creating a presentation, posting online, or using music, images, or videos, copyright rules are something you interact with more often than you might think. In this lesson, I'm going to explain what copyright is, what it protects, and what rights creators have over their work. We'll also look at important ideas like fair use and public domain and talk about what can happen if copyright rules are not followed. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a clear understanding of how to use other people's work responsibly while also protecting your own creative ideas. Let's get started. Copyright is defined as regulations that describe how an original work can be used and copied and how authors and artists can be compensated for their created work. In simpler terms, copyright is a legal protection for creators of original work. Its main purpose is to encourage creativity by protecting the rights of the people who create books, music, movies, art, and other original works. Creating something takes time, effort, and imagination, and it wouldn't be fair if anyone could just copy it or profit from it without permission. Copyright not only protects creators financially, but also ensures that they receive credit for their work. By respecting copyright, we support artists, authors, and inventors, while also learning to value originality and give proper credit whenever we use someone else's work. Almost anything can be copyrighted, from books, music, and lyrics to films, inventions, software, art, and images. Copyright can even occur with more specific things, like catchphrases, slogans, or advertisements. However, it's important to remember that ideas alone cannot be copyright. Copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself. You cannot claim a concept, theory, or general thought as your own. For example, if my mother has a special recipe she uses to make casserole, anyone can make casserole using the same method. But if she writes a cookbook with unique instructions, descriptions, and wording, that specific book is protected by copyright. Other people can still cook casserole, but they cannot copy her exact instructions or text into their own cookbook without permission. This distinction encourages creativity while allowing everyone to build on ideas freely. Copyright owners have specific legal rights that allow them to control how their creative works are used. They can reproduce their work, which means they decide how and when copies are made, whether in books, videos, or digital formats. They can also distribute their work, meaning they decide how it is sold, shared, or given to others. They also have the right to perform or display their work publicly, such as reading it aloud, recording it, or turning it into a play or movie. Additionally, copyright holders can create derivative works, which means they can write sequels, expand their stories, or even create crossovers with other series. For example, I love the Magic Tree House books and could imagine writing my own story about kids adventuring through time. However, Mary Pope Osborne owns the copyright to her Magic Tree House series. She controls the characters, plot, and text, and she can sell as many copies as she wants, give them to anyone, perform or record readings of her books, and write new stories or series extensions without anyone else having the right to copy them. This shows how copyright protects creators, giving them both control and the ability to benefit from the time, effort, and creativity they put into their work. When using information from the internet or other sources, there are important copyright rules that students must follow. First, students should never copy and paste large sections of someone else's work into their own assignment. Even if the information is helpful, it must be used properly. Second, students must also give credit to the original creator. This is done by citing sources. Giving credit shows respect for the creator's works and helps avoid plagiarism. Third, students should use their own words when explaining information. This is called paraphrasing. Instead of copying directly, students should read, understand, and then rewrite the idea in their own way. Another important rule is to only use small portions of the work under something called fair use. Fair use allows limited use of copyrighted material for educational purposes, but it does not allow copying entire works. Finally, students should check for permission or licenses such as Creative Commons, which allow certain uses of materials. Not everything on the internet is free to use, even if it is easy to access. Following these rules helps students stay honest, respectful, and legally safe when using information. When students use information from books, websites, or other sources, it's important to use that information correctly. First, students must always give credit to the original source. This is called citing. Citations tell others where the information came from and give credit to the creator. Second, students should use their own words when explaining information. This is called paraphrasing. Instead of copying directly, students should read the information, understand it, then rewrite it in their own way. If a student does use the exact words from a source, they must put those words in quotation marks and still give credit. This shows that the words are not their own. Students should also only use the amount of information they actually need. Copying too much, even with credit, can still violate copyright rules. Finally, students should make sure they are using reliable and trusted sources. This includes educational websites, books, and databases rather than random or unverified websites. Using sources correctly helps students stay honest, avoid plagiarism, and follow copyright rules while creating strong and credible work. Plagiarism and copyright are often confused, but they are not the same thing. Plagiarism happens when someone uses another person's work and pretends it is their own. This usually means not giving credit to the original creator. For example, if a student copies a paragraph from a website and puts it into their project without citing the source, that is plagiarism. Copyright, on the other hand, is a legal protection. It gives creators ownership over their work, such as books, music, videos, and images. Copyright laws control how the work can be used, shared, or copied. The key difference is that plagiarism is an ethical issue, meaning it is about honesty and academic integrity, while copyright is a legal issue, meaning it can involve laws and consequences outside of school. It is important to understand that something can be plagiarized even if it is not copyrighted, and something can violate copyright even if you give credit. This is why students need to understand both concepts and follow the rules for each. Fair use and public domain are two important ways that copyrighted works can be used legally without permission. Public domain works are no longer under copyright protection, so anyone can use, adapt, or share them freely. For example, the original story of Beauty and the Beast and the classic Wizard of Oz story are in the public domain, which means writers and creators can retell these stories, make adaptations, or create new works based on them. However, copyright still protects specific expressions like modern movies, musicals, or illustrations of these stories. This is why in the musical Wicked, Dorothy's shoes cannot be red as they are in the movie version of The Wizard of Oz. The red shoe design from the film is still copyrighted, even though the original story is in the public domain. Fair use allows people to use copyrighted material in limited ways for purposes like teaching, commentary, research, or criticism. For example, a teacher can show a short clip from a Beauty and the Beast movie in the class to explain storytelling techniques, or a student could quote a few lines from a modern adaptation in a report for discussion. It's important to remember that fair use depends on factors like the purpose of use, the amount used, and the effect on the work's market value. Using public domain materials like the original stories or images from old editions is safe, while using copyrighted adaptations requires caution and proper credit. These examples show how creators and students can responsibly use stories and characters in ways that respect copyright while still encouraging creativity and learning. Using someone else's work without permission can have serious consequences. Legally, copyrighted materials are protected by law, so using it without permission can sometimes result in fines, lawsuits, or the removal of your content if posted online. For example, posting a popular song in a video might get your video taken down, and repeated violations could lead to bigger problems. Academically, copying work for school without giving credit is considered plagiarism. This can result in lower grades, having to redo assignments, or other school discipline. For instance, copying images or paragraphs from the internet for a science project could cost points or be marked incomplete. Ethically and socially, using someone else's work without permission can damage trust. Sharing a friend's artwork as your own can hurt your friendship and make teachers or classmates question your honesty. Understanding these consequences shows why it's important to follow copyright rules. It keeps you out of trouble legally, helps you succeed academically, and teaches you to respect the creators of the work you use. Now, let's look at some real-life situations that show how copyright works and why it's important to respect creators' rights. First, imagine you're making a video about your favorite hobby and you add a popular song you found online as background music. Even though it's just for a school project, that song is copyrighted. Using it without permission is considered copyright infringement. Instead, you could use music that is royalty-free, in the public domain, or that your teacher provides for class projects. Next, suppose you're making a slideshow about animals and you copy pictures directly from Google Images without giving credit from pictures you find online are copyrighted, which means you can't just copy or use them freely. A better option is to look for free-to-use images, such as Creative Commons images, or always cite the sources of the pictures you use. Finally, imagine your friend draws an original picture and you post it on social media as if it were your own. That drawing is your friend's creation and it's protected by copyright. Posting it without permission is a violation of their rights. The best approach is to always ask permission and give credit whenever you share someone else's creative work. These examples show that copyright isn't just a real rule. It helps protect creators and teaches us to be responsible with the work of others. Even in school projects or online posts, it's important to follow copyright rules and give credit where it's due. Another key point is that copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself. This means you are always free to come up with your own version of a concept, but you cannot copy someone else's exact words, images, or creative work. This allows creativity to grow while still respecting the rights of original creators. You should also remember that the copyright holders have important rights. They control how their work is copied, shared, performed, or turned into something new. This is why you cannot take someone else's work and use it however you want without permission. We also discussed fair use in public domain. Fair use allows limited use of copyrighted material for purposes like teaching, research, or commentary, while public domain works are free for anyone to use. However, it's important to be careful because newer versions or adaptations of public domain works can still be copyrighted. Finally, always keep in mind the consequences of not following copyright rules. These can include legal issues, school consequences like losing points or redoing assignments, or even damage to your reputation or relationships with others. Respecting copyright helps you stay responsible, honest, and fair. Overall, understanding copyright helps you become not only a better student, but also a more respectful creator. Whenever you use someone else's work, take a moment to ask yourself if you're using it the right way and giving proper credit. That's how we support creativity and continue learning together. Thank you for listening. I hope this lesson helps you understand how copyright works and why it's important to respect creators' rights in your own projects and everyday life.